Now, keep your texts and comments coming in about climate change. It's going to get hot and heavy with the old climate change debates, I think, Kevin. Kevin, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for coming into us.
Thank you.
Your name is Kevin Hyland. Tell me a little bit about yourself, please.
So I was a police officer in the UK for 30 years. I now live in Ireland. I was the Anti-Slavery Commissioner for the United Kingdom, and my role was to get the United Kingdom, but also work internationally to prevent and to detect cases of human trafficking and modern-day slavery. And I'm now Ireland's representative to the Council of Europe for Trafficking Group of Experts.
Define human trafficking for me, please.
Well, human trafficking is where a person is coerced, they are moved, or they are kept in a condition where they are used as a commodity. So that could be sexual exploitation, forced labour, domestic servitude. In some countries it's for their organs, for sham marriages, or for a number of other forms of exploitation. So it's where a person is chosen and somebody uses them and keeps them or moves them for making money.
We had one very big case in Britain in the last few years where people were kept in slave-like conditions and families were convicted for that. That really brought it up as well in a big way, didn't it? Highlighted it.
Yeah, so I think the case you're talking about is the Rooney case, where people were kept in traveller sites and they were really badly exploited and taken out to do all sorts of jobs. It may be construction work, it may have been garden clearing, or it may have been on the place where they worked directly. But, you know, in the UK last year, the number was 7,000 people were identified as being trafficked, and 1,800 of those were British nationals. In Ireland last year, it was 64 people, and one of those was an Irish national, but 4 of them were children. So this is an issue everywhere in the world. And, you know, around the world at the moment, the estimates are there are 40 million people in slavery, 151 million children in exploitative labour conditions. So this is a really serious issue. And it connects to other things like climate change, because people are displaced because of climate, because women and girls see gender inequality. They have to move sometimes because of conflict. That means there's now nearly 70 million people displaced around the world. And as I said this morning, you know, Ireland has experience of that when it had to be displaced because of the famine. And lots of people from Ireland ended up being exploited around the world then.
We're talking about a programme as well that was on last night about climate change and climate migrants. And if the predictions are correct, we will get millions more being displaced through and because of climate change in the coming decades.
Yeah, and that's the problem. We're actually seeing that already. You know, it's people who are living in parts of the world where the opportunity of growing their own vegetables or having their own industry has gone. So they have to move. And when they move, there may be no options for them. And then they get offered things that are often too good to be true, but they think they're going to happen. But it's not just people like that. You know, I've met people in Greece, people from Syria, and one family, it was a doctor and her husband who was a civil engineer. They came to Greece and they flee conflict, and then they had nothing. And then they ended up being forced to work in really terrible conditions. These were highly educated people.
Because my next question was, does class come into this? Is it mainly those from the lower socioeconomic classes that are brought into or coerced into enslavement and human trafficking?
Very often it's in areas where there's a vulnerability, you know, whether that's oppressive regimes, whether that's because you do have a class system or a caste system. So they are a commodity just by the very nature of their being there. But it does actually happen elsewhere where people become vulnerable because of the conditions around them, like the 2 Syrians I just mentioned. But here in Ireland, you know, it will be people who end up in perhaps recycling centres. It's happened in Wexford, in the fields, you know, for potatoes and strawberries, or in brothels in Dublin or elsewhere in Ireland, or in Galway, where we see a case where women were taken there and trafficked and exploited, or in the fishing industry, which is becoming a big problem in Ireland, where people are in shocking conditions. So it's in a number of industries. And so it's not just people who are very poor, but it's people who are made vulnerable by a number of circumstances.
Is there a difference between human trafficking and being in an employment situation, in inverted commas, where you feel you can't get out of? Like, how grey is that line? You may have somebody working, as you say, in the fishing industry, maybe slaving away in a field, toiling hard, and because the employer has tied their passport and tied up their whole thing, is that enslavement?
Well, it can be one of the indicators, and the tied passport idea, has been made illegal in many parts of the world. In Ireland, there's the atypical scheme that works for fishermen, which actually creates vulnerability, because if you are controlled by somebody and you can't take another job, that means you can put other controlling measures in. So it is one of the indicators. But the other thing we've got to see, and something I showed at the schools here in Waterford, was the fact that this is connected to bigger industry. The mobile phones that we carry, the cobalt that comes from them is taken from mines, perhaps in Africa or in India, and there will be children in those mines. And in some of those mines, there's 5 children dying a month. And that is actually in our business culture. And we need to do something about that. That is something so serious, and that's something for the UN and for, governments to address.
Kevin, do people know this is happening? Like, I was just looking through your resume and the history and the work you've done on this, and others have done on it. And you were talking at De La Salle yesterday, and the EU has a Greta programme, GRETA. Like, is this all known?
I think some of it is known, but it's not known well enough. And, for example, one of the things that I identified in the UK was car washes. If you actually look at a car wash, sometimes you see that people aren't wearing health and safety. People don't have gloves. These are chemicals that are being used. The water goes back into the drains. It's not being cleaned properly. All shocking conditions, and 6 people washing your car perhaps for €5 or €6. It just doesn't add up. And these people are invariably foreign. So what is happening there? And then we may see nail bars. We look at the incidents that have happened recently with the Vietnamese. They were all destined for nail bars or for other forms of exploitation. So we need to join this up, and this needs big investment by governments at the EU level, at the UN level, and at things like the G20, which Ireland can make a difference on, as it's a member of the EU, which is part of the G20.
So if there is a limited amount of knowledge on this, why are the governments, the countries of the world, not doing more about it? Do they accept in part that there may be a certain percentage of the world's economic population will be involved in this?
Well, if that is the case, then that's a terrible position we're in. And I think that there needs to be a bigger commitment on this, just like climate change. We need more than policy. We need more than conversation. We need action. And, in the international legislation, which Ireland is signatory to on 3 accounts, the things like which Ireland has been criticised at international level and by the UN was, for example, victims at the moment, whoever they are identified, they're put into direct provision. Now, direct provision is not the place to put a victim of a crime who may have been brought from the other side of the world and ends up being exploited, maybe sexually exploited, maybe abused in a labour situation. Because the chances are you could be putting them back with somebody who knows the trafficker. You could even be putting them back with the trafficker. You could be putting them somewhere where they're being exploited. So even the basics that need to be done at international law level that are just about humanitarian responses. And it's not just Ireland, it's across the world that it's not happening properly, including in the UK, and I've been quite critical about that as Commissioner. So what we need is some real honesty, we need some action, we need to look at what has been agreed and what has been signed up to, and then make it happen.
How did you get on to schools? How did you get on to De La Salle? Good response?
It was incredible, and it was great to see young people. It shows we have got a bright future. We can get depressed with everything, but what I see is, younger people like we see with climate change. If we look at Greta Thunberg, she is changing the world on the issue of climate. And I mean, President Mary Robinson is really driving that as well, and gender inequality. So Ireland is playing a big role on a number of issues. And of course, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are the 17 commitments of the world in 2015. Ireland was the author at the UN with Kenya. So Ireland is playing a role. And when I saw the young people at the schools today and yesterday, I feel really uplifted that there is a future, and they are the future leaders, and they need to hold the current leaders to account.
If there's somebody listening to this programme in Waterford or the South East and they think and they suspect somebody working in a nail bar that they may be going to, or a beauty salon, or they know there's somebody fishing out of a particular boat, and they think, how do they approach it? What do they say? Do they actually say to the person, can I ask you how much you're getting paid here? Or what's your story?
Well, you've got to remember, this is a serious crime. And this has been on the Irish statute book since 2008, and it was amended in 2013. The crime holds life imprisonment in certain circumstances. It's a very serious crime. However, another issue is there's never been a conviction in Ireland of human trafficking. So the criminals are acting with impunity in many ways. But what the people should do, if you see something and you believe it is human trafficking or exploitation, just think of it as a serious crime. What would you do in those circumstances? So you would phone the Gardaí, or the Gardaí have a website, which is Blue Blindfold. You could contact that anonymously.
Blue Blindfold.
Or you could also contact Crime Stoppers or the confidential line of the Guards. And there is also charities working in this area as well that you can see online. But this is a serious crime.
Have you any knowledge if the Gardaí are taking this seriously enough?
So I've met with the Guards who are dealing with this in Dublin, and the Guards themselves do take it seriously. It's a very challenging crime. They do need more resources, I would say.
I'd imagine.
They need the support of the DPP, but they also need the political support and the funding to make sure that, you know, people around Ireland aren't being trafficked, and they do their bit internationally. That's important as well. You know, big companies who make billions of euros and dollars and pounds a year, that's good. You know, good work is essential. But if they're making billions and there are children down the mines for mobile phones or for the shiny materials on our cars, because mica is in demand. In 2021, the EU is bringing in new legislation around conflict minerals so that things coming into the EU will be checked if they come from conflict zones or certain countries where it's believed child labour may be exploitative. But two minerals have been left out of it, cobalt and mica. And every time I go to events or meet with people, I ask them why. And I'm at a conference with big businesses this week in Rome. And one of the things I'm going to ask them is why.
Why
and
is
the politicians, why?
Go on, tell me why.
Well, it's obvious the companies involved have a lot of say. So we need to be honest about things.
That's the thing. That's the question I asked you earlier, Kevin. Governments know this, but they're being lobbied by big business, and then they're choosing to ignore this. So they're complicit, potentially, in crime.
Well, and that's something I spoke about today. So the euros that the taxpayers pay, and for example, that may be rubber gloves that are bought in Malaysia for the health service. That may be for uniforms. It may be for school products. And some of those are made in slave labour. So some countries have brought in transparency law. France has brought in very strong transparency laws around that. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that our taxpayers' money isn't funding crime. Now, there are some companies who are really pushing the boat out on this and really working hard. And I know some companies who have really put people on the ground in countries where this is happening to stop it. So it is possible. And, you know, I think that that's what we need to do. We need to see governments saying, our taxpayers' money, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this isn't funding the crime of human trafficking.
Kevin Hyland, chair of the All-Ireland Anti-Human Trafficking Project, former member of the Met Police Anti-Human Slavery Unit. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Now, welcome back to the programme. A lot of people ringing and texting in about climate change. We'll come to that in a few minutes. Regina Mangan, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming in to us.
Thank you for having me, Damien.
Liberty Blue estate agents. The latest daft.ie report. What are the headline figures before we dig deeper into it?
So the average rent in Waterford is €1,007 according to the Daft report. That is still €200 less than Limerick and €300 less than Galway per month, and Dublin, to put it into context, is 2,044 on average. But look, DATS and STAT are right. When you bunch it all together, it does skew up numbers. I think you'd be hard pressed to get a property to rent in Dublin for less than $2,500. So on average, if you base it on a 2-bed property, the average price for a 2-bed property in Waterford is somewhere in the region of €850. And in Dublin, it's 2,500. and it's significantly higher, probably 1,200 in Limerick. So we are still, albeit that the prices are rising and they're rising in Waterford, inflation has slowed down drastically. I think the last time we were well over 10% in Waterford because we were rising at a fierce rate, and now we're back to 5% inflation.
Because we had been coming from such a low starting point.
Yeah, and the rent pressure zone extended to Waterford was a good thing. You know, I think I remember saying that to you on the last end. Like, you can't have prices to continuously rise. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for our children. It's not healthy for the next generation. And in Ireland, we are moving away from home ownership. I remember telling my bank manager that years ago, 10 years ago, walking down the street, I said, Nora, people are going to be renting properties in Ireland. They're not going to be owning them, the next generation. So, like, we're nearly half of our society are renting now.
Half?
44% based on the census. So, like, you know, it's nearly half. So people are migrating. What we're finding in Waterford actually is that a lot of people are relocating to Waterford because it's more affordable. Like, that's good news, isn't it?
And what about Dungarvan? What do we know about the county?
I haven't checked the Dungarvan numbers, but all I know, right, is it's a complete disaster. There is no stock in Dungarvan to rent. I haven't checked it this morning, but in general, it's bad. There just isn't stock.
What about the stock in Waterford?
In terms of stock in Waterford today, right, there are 29 houses to rent, of which 8 are students, because I went through and counted them all. So that's 21 houses for families to rent. And that's anything from a beautiful executive home in Newtown for 1,700 down to a house in Ferrybank for 875 or €900. So,
and what do you think of that level of stock? Is that terrible?
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. Like, if you can imagine a wonderful jobs announcement now in the morning, let's just say, like, we're talking about Brexit. David McWilliams spoke at a conference that I was at last week in Dublin, and he reckons that Brexit is going to be a really good thing for Ireland. Now, obviously, he's not a fortune teller, but in his opinion, that there will be great opportunities for companies wanting to trade, obviously, in Europe, and Ireland is well positioned to take up on that advantage. I think the worrying thing might be that a lot of them will want to settle in Dublin, and Dublin is seriously in distress infrastructure-wise and everything. So Waterford is well positioned in terms of stock. Yeah, it's not good. Like, you know, I was just reading about Dublin and Cork. Like 25,000 new purpose-built rental homes are being built in Cork and Dublin over the next 5 years. There's none being built in Waterford, purpose-built rental properties.
Why is that the case?
Those properties that are being built by hedge funds, pensions, and they're availing of significant tax breaks. You know, it's.
Is it because the returns are so much higher there?
It is, yeah. I mean, the big issue here is obviously the cost to build. They're saying, you know, until building comes in line with affordability, then, you know, we are in big trouble here. Yeah, it is. It's the return on the investment.
Is it a good time to invest in Waterford? For example, Rob Cass was quoted in the Sunday Business Post, well, not Rob Cass directly, but spokespeople for different people quoted, and that there should be, I suppose, more developments, and that this would allow, if the housing stock increased, this would allow for businesses to say, OK, we have houses for our workforce if we do decide to make an announcement.
Yeah, we need stock. Absolutely. We absolutely need stock. But there is new housing developments coming online in Waterford. We've seen little to no construction over the last few years in Waterford, but there is definitely green shoots. But I suppose in terms of apartments, that's sort of solving a problem for the rental market. There's no apartment.
There's no new apartments being built at all.
None. So these are owner-occupier homes that are being built. So they're not going to help the rental supply. And we have to remember what's happening. Society is changing. So we have a whole load of different things happening. Young people are more transient. They don't want to be bogged down with a big mortgage and stuck in a place. They want to be able to live and have money and not be tied down. Then you have marriage breakdowns. So that means instead of one home, it's two homes. Couples cohabiting together, maybe who don't want the commitment of buying a property. People migrating from rural to urban. That's a really big thing, especially people getting into their autumn years. We see a huge shift from rural to urban.
How do you predict the rental prices will go in the next year in Waterford?
Well, it's dictated now by the rent pressure zone. So there are areas that are precluded from rent pressure zone, like O'Connell Street and Grace Dew and Ferrybank. I would suspect that government will bring that in over the next 12 months. I think that's healthy. The rent pressure zone, 4% increase. It means everybody can budget. They know it's 4%, and they can budget accordingly. It's fair, I think, on both sides.
Regina Mangan from Liberty Blue Estate Agents, thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now, a lot of people saying they were very impressed with Kevin Hyland's talk. Why, for God's sake, are these facts not put on the television, maybe, about those children dying in the mines, etc.? Why is it not said? Now, we're getting a lot of texting about climate change, and a very, very interesting debate, an important debate, because some people that are texting in are basically saying that it's a load of bull. For example, Barry has texted saying, ozone layer, all a load of bull. It's Mother Nature, simple as that. At least there's jobs out of it. Good morning, Damien. So we have climate change deniers, people that say that climate change is not happening. Then others saying that climate change is a natural thing. For example, did we come from an ice age since year dot? Scientifically, yes, we did. Another person, Damien, it would be nice to have a debate about global warming because at the moment the media have been all one-sided. It's a real brainwashing for global warming. And what about liberty to choose to believe or not? If you're against fake news, you should get all the information and the normal media without prejudice. Another person, climate change is important, but our 24/7 cat lab should be first fight. That is in from Jimmy. Hi, I'm back again. You were saying fossil fuel companies are trying to contradict the climate change scientists, but could renewable energy companies be doing the same? It's big money talking industry. Damien, they say that Ireland can make a difference, but it's like the bees. We have to look at it all like a hive. It takes the effort of every single bee to make the hive produce honey. That's from Michael. Damien, I've worked all over the world in the oil and gas industry for most of my life. If people saw what's going on in places like Africa and the Middle East, they'd not be worried about a few cows in a little country like Ireland. Climate change is only a joke. Nothing will change in those countries. Flares and generators spewing out smoke. Look at Nigeria, DMRC Republic. That's Congo, I think. Millions of old cars being shipped in diesel machinery from Europe. Climate change is only a joke. So again, those that are texting in, some that are texting in, are saying climate change is a joke and that it's a load of bull. So we have a dichotomy there in people's views. And that's going to be very important going forward because the message about climate change, some people are saying, is completely wrong. Let us know what you think. Now, in the meantime, others texting in about the Red Iron said it was absolutely fabulous last night. This is Jim Nolan's play. They had a preview there last night and said it was great. One texter saying that it was brilliant, well done to all involved. Only one thing marred our enjoyment. Someone's mobile phone rang during the performance. Not once but twice. The lady took the call outside the theatre while the play was going on. Took the call inside the theatre. Very distracting. It happened despite an announcement before the performance for people to make sure that their mobile phones are turned off. So if anybody's going this week, please turn off your mobile phone. Now, in the last few days, I was down having a chat with director Jim Nolan on the stage. Firstly, we started on the seats looking out onto the stage of the Red Iron. It's a fabulous new play by Jim Nolan. It's premiering tonight in Waterford. And here is the little chat with Jim. Jim, How's it going?
It's going all right. It's a long time since I met you. I was a lot younger when I met you 3 months ago. We've had a brilliant trip, actually, since I saw you last. I think you were very kindly covered the launch of our funded campaign, and you did a This Is Your Life with Jim. And Jim is delighted to report he's still alive.
News of your demise is greatly exaggerated.
Exaggerated, yeah. So it's been a great old journey since, and I was glad to have been able to make it.
I'd say you're mad busy, rehearsals, and
yeah.
we're going to do a little video on this and we'll have it up online, but describe to our listeners what we are looking at here.
What we're looking at is the Red Iron Bridge. Incredibly, I remember actually, and he's probably here in the building with me, Jamie Beamish. For a different reason, I was on the stage of the Theatre Royal with Jamie and Dermot Quinn, the set designer, who's the technical manager in the Theatre Royal, about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, and I took a photograph out of my pocket and I said to Dermot, can you build this? And he said, it's the Red Iron Bridge. And I said, yeah, but I need it. I'm going to write a play set on the bridge. And he said, look up. And this was in the other theatre, in the Theatre Royal. And he said, you see the flight tower? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you see the ceiling above that? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, if you can get rid of those two, he said, I could put the Red Iron Bridge on this stage. And I said, I don't want you to put it on this stage. I'm doing it in Garter Lane. And that was the start of an incredible journey. So what we're looking at here is a cutaway of a section of the Red Iron Bridge on which the play is set. And I think you can see we're looking at it as we speak in worklight, so you're not seeing it at its pristine best.
Well, I just went over and gently put my foot on the first girder here. Obviously, it's made of wood and light wood.
No, it's not.
And it looks so real. You could actually think that actually think, and well, God forbid if I put my foot through it.
Yeah, if we can keep talking. That section, we were warned in the rehearsal, it's all made of wood.
Yeah.
Incredibly, as you look at it. But so we were told we don't step on that.
That's the main one, not to step on.
Here's where we can go. So this is where the actors will come on. And we can walk around now across the Red Iron Bridge for the first time, in your case. Isn't it wonderful?
That is just fabulous.
Just apart from Dermot's wonderful design, the finish work it's incredible for me, even now when I know all about the illusion of theatre, to think that this isn't the track. The actual steel girders, it's beautiful to look at. And that's the work of, apart from Dermot designing it, a guy called Andrew Cusack, who does a lot of work with Spree. He's a brilliant scenic artist. The jersey that we're looking at, there's a Mount Sion jersey, courtesy of the great Jim Green. The Waterford jersey came from Dermot Quinn, whose family are steeped in Mount Sion, the history of Mount Sion. There's a whole hurling riff to the play. It's set on the Monday after we lost to Galway in the All-Ireland. And there's 15,000 people, of which I was one, down on the quay waiting for the team to come home. And then there's these guys and girls who are out on the bridge, some of them thinking they should be down on the quay. And they're back on the bridge to remember a deceased friend of theirs who was a former member of their teenage gang. And that's what kind of brings them out to the bridge, all of which was really an excuse for me to write a play set in Waterford and to hear that Waterford voice again. As you know, Damien, I've been at this a long time, but I discovered, TV Honan pointed out to me a year or two back, that I hadn't written a play set in Waterford since The Gods Are Angry, Miss Carr. Way back, 1985, it was the first Red Kettle play. And about 2 years ago, I decided it was time to redress that. And so I decided that the next play, whatever it was, I'd be listening to and writing that Waterford voice again.
I was talking to you last summer about a different project, and you were talking about this project in your mind and how it was going to come to fruition. Did you find it difficult to write?
They're all difficult to write, and I guess the older you get, the more difficult they get, like everything else.
But in terms of writing, let's go back to the writing.
We'll get back to the writing.
Did you find it difficult?
Yeah, it was a challenge. They all are. What was delightful, though, and this was even in the writing of it before we went near the rehearsal room, was to hear the Waterford voice again. The play, to some extent, started with me finding a photograph of the Red Iron in the News and Star, which I just thought was a beautifully made photograph and a really dramatic setting. But the impulse to write the play was just a sense of me missing writing that voice and writing Waterford stories. And I remember around the same time, maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, walking through Red Square, St. John Roberts Square, whatever it's called, and there was a guy sitting on the mausoleum there, and I looked at him, and I kind of vaguely knew him, but not well. And this was a man in his sort of early 50s. And I thought, that's a story. Whatever his story is, I bet it doesn't get told on the stage. He seemed to me to be an ordinary man. And these are ordinary folk who are in extraordinary circumstances. And I kind of set out to write the story of people who weren't featuring on our stage. And their stories are seldom told. And I'm kind of really glad that I've done that. And I think when I listened to it and watched it in the rehearsal room as it's come to life, I think Waterford audiences will recognise these characters and recognise and empathise with the story.
Great stories have a universality. Is it a play that has themes that will travel through time, not just through geography?
Yeah, I think wasn't it the great Patrick Kavanagh poem where Kavanagh was writing about coming across two men fighting over the ownership of a rood of land in Monaghan back in the 30s, and he was inclined to dismiss the row as being a small thing of nothing until he remembered that Homer had written the Iliad about such a local row. And so I think all our local stories are, by definition, are universal. Whether they travel or not, whether this play will ever travel or not, is irrelevant. It's written for this audience at this place and time. But I think every story has a universal sort of eloquence if it's properly told. And there's a man, no better man to tell it than the great Keith Dunphy.
What's that?
Who saw a microphone and decided to come on.
Keith, come here for a second. How's it going?
Hi.
Tell us about your involvement.
In this show?
No, in Jim's life. Have you got into his head? Have you annoyed him over the last few weeks and months?
Jim is partly responsible for the reason why I still continue this ludicrous life, being an actor, which is a very difficult, brutal life. But we do it because we love to try and make an audience feel something. That's why I keep doing it. But Jim, to me, as I said to a friend in London, is a mentor.
He's getting embarrassed now, and, the big red head on him. It's like the day we did the day of This Is Your Life.
He's a great mentor of mine, and he's not just a mentor of mine, actually. He's for a number of people that have been in the arts. I think, and that's important.
How is he? How is he as a director?
Jim is a
Is he a Jurgen Klopp? Is he Alex Ferguson? Is he?
No, he's a fine. Actually, to be honest with you, before I even when I went away to pursue a career watching Jim, I used to watch Jim directing shows and the great Tom Hickeys of the world and all those guys. He is a stickler and brilliance for truth. He's a man that has an ear that hears truth, which is very unique. Some directors are very good at, say, they will see some good pictures, they'll be able to move the actors. But I think for me, what's very interesting with Jim is just he knows it. You can hear it. You can even feel it yourself as an actor. He knows that it's not what's coming out could be even more truthful, which is very unique.
We'll let you continue your walk on the Red Bridge. Where are you off to? You're off for a stroll. You get.
Could I say in passing, it is...
That's the first time you've probably heard him say something like that. That hasn't been planned.
He's not talking to me for the last 3 weeks.
I know he's not talking to you. You're not here.
He's doing a great job. I talked to you about the Waterford Voice. I'm really, really blessed to have been able to assemble people like Keith, Michael Quinlan, Brian Doherty, people who are pursuing their career elsewhere and who have come back especially to do this show, and to be joining them, or to have them be joined by Jenny Ledwell, Greta Rochford, and an English actor called Neil Ditt. It's one of those great circumstances where I have no excuses if it all goes horribly wrong. We have a wonderful team of people working on the stage and off it, and it is genuinely wonderful to be able to say, if this ship goes down, we don't have any excuses or anywhere to hide. It's been a good team. Tough journey and a very short journey. For financial reasons, it's been a shorter rehearsal than it should have been, but we've caught up.
I know it's a few days now, and this might go out on Monday or Tuesday. It's a few days to go, and this can be very tense times, but you give the impression to me that you're actually enjoying it.
Yeah. Do you know what? It feels... When I'm working, especially in a rehearsal room, more than writing, it's like being 17 again. I think I've said to you before that the nature of the word, it's called a play, and there's a reason why they call it a play. And when I'm doing a play, when I'm working, especially working with actors, it is me being at play. It's very hard work, it's very intense work, but the privilege of being in a place where you get paid money to make up stories and to lift something from the page and make it three-dimensional is something that I've never lost the wonder of that. We're telling it honestly. Keith spoke about, When I left Telecom all those years ago, on the day that I left, a man said to me, my foreman said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going working in the theatre. And he said, it can't be done. He said, you can't put a man's life on the stage. And it was a great challenge. I mean, I went home that evening and thought, Jesus, maybe he's right. But in fact, the 30 years since have all been about responding to the challenge of that. When you think of, we're actually on the stage and we're looking out at empty seats that will hopefully be filled on over the next few days and for the next 3 weeks. But everybody who's sitting in them, what they have in common is that they pay money to people like me to tell the truth about something that is clearly a fiction. Do you know what I mean? The whole nature of it is crazy. My friend, the old guy, the Mick Devine, the old foreman, well, he had to be right. But in fact, he wasn't right. You can do it if you do it truthfully. And people out there are prepared to engage in this massive conspiracy that something that's patently untrue can be made true. And isn't that the miracle of theatre? And like when you say, are you having fun? How could you not? Do you know, I'm nervous and you know, the usual sort of butterflies. But it's still great crack.
It's still great crack, it certainly is. I think Jim Nolan is a fabulous person. He's a great writer, he's a lovely man, and I want to wish him and everybody involved in Garter Lane and the cast and crew the best of success and break many a leg, as they say, in the productions, and very good luck tonight to everybody involved. Somebody's texting in, is that Keith Dunphy from Foyle Street? I actually don't know. People want to check that or text me in, please do. Damien, listen to your programme. The person who mentioned about the mobile at Garter Lane Theatre, I wonder if it's a Waterford thing and the lack of appreciation for the occasion sometimes. I'm a regular at Garter Lane. I hope to get to Red Iron during its run. But on 4 occasions when I've attended, mobile phones went off. On one occasion, it was a one-person performance, which is quite disconcerting. It's also happened on one occasion at the Theatre Royal, so maybe it's a case that some people in the city need educating. Damien, listen to your programme. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Damien, someone needs to talk to supermarkets about plastics. I was buying carrots last week and they were 49 cents a kilogram in a plastic bag. If I could buy them loose, I could buy them loose, but they cost $1.89 a kilogram. Figure that one out. And that is in from Breed. Breed, you are so right on that. There is a thing happening tonight in the Parish Hall in the Roar. Éigse Slieve Rua tonight, Parish Hall in the Roar. Lecture 8 o'clock by Liz Gillis on Bloody Sunday, November 24th, 1920. All welcome. Coming up, we have a big announcement regarding the pantomime. Now, the texter has corrected that text. Doyle Street. Yes, I think, Wayne, we can agree with that. It's Doyle Street.
It is Doyle Street.
Doyle Street, yeah. Keith Dunphy is from Doyle Street. Keith is in the performance tonight. Really looking forward to the performance tonight. Another thing that a lot of people are looking forward to is the panto. I'm joined by Wayne Brown. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning, Damien. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming over. We got you on a free transfer under the Bosman ruling from the Breakfast Show. It's good to see you. Firstly, on Brexit, how do you think the whole thing is playing?
Couldn't care less.
Tell us about the society. 1985 it was founded?
1985, yeah, 34 years now it's running, so we are the longest running kind of family entertainment thing in Waterford. And back then in those days, I suppose it started off with a smaller kind of 10-show run. It was, I suppose, to be fair to it, it was of its day, But now, over the years, like demands and support from the public has grown so much now. We're up to now this 21-show incarnation. And
21 shows?
21 shows in December, yeah.
Tell me about the work that goes into it. Like, you're planning you've nearly got next year's one.
We actually have next year's dates in.
Dates already. So you're working on it on a year-by-year basis at least.
We're working on it year by year. Really, our year starts in, I suppose, June or July. We start getting together the team, the production team, and, getting a script and starting to put together some ideas on songs, what's current in the charts and that kind of thing. What's happening, So if you step out of line and do something stupid over the next 2 weeks, you're in trouble, Damien. But all the politicians, beware, like anything that happens.
You don't have any spiders in it, no?
There is a spider, but that's all I'm saying.
Because arachnophobia is a thing that affects a lot of people. We know it's not a nice thing. There's no, there isn't here. No, we're okay.
Lovely.
It is phenomenal to think the success and how it's grown. Do you have fun putting it together?
Oh, totally. Like, we often say that the rehearsals are better than the show. If we put in half the stuff that we say and do at rehearsals, well, we'd be arrested for start. But it is actually great fun. I think we spent half the time at rehearsals initially messing and adding things in. But as it goes on, at this stage now, with a couple of weeks to go, it's starting to get a little bit more serious and, making sure the mayhem is rehearsed. Because it
encapsulates a form of theatrical experience which has, for centuries, been at the heart of a lot of theatres. The idea of a vaudeville kind of a mix and match and having something current, having it on stage, making people laugh, having a song, having a dance, having
abuse at the stage, and
having fun. Yeah. It's that engagement. Now tonight, Jim Nolan's play. People will be sitting, and there'll be no phones gone off, and it'll be a different experience. Yeah. But the experience, and I suppose one of the high points would have been during the Victorian age. Mrs. Brown's Boys was incarnated on stage as well. So it's great. It's a great.
It is, and something else is very important, and we always say it's often children's first experience of theatre. Yeah. It's the first chance, maybe one of the first things they'll go to. And for that reason, we've noticed over the years, like I'm doing it now, 25 years, I think, at this stage. And some of the children who are coming now are children and grandchildren of people who used to come as teenagers and children back then. It just seems to have gone through generation to generation, and people are still booking the family every Christmas. People are booking tickets. They don't even know who they're going to bring. They're just booking tickets and bringing people. You know? It's this stage. It's a tradition.
A tradition, but that tradition wouldn't have been, I suppose, kept going if it wasn't for quality. You have to have good people on stage performing well.
Well, we're blessed. We have a core group of people, and it's not everyone who can do panto, because you can put on the best actor, the best singer in the world, put them in front of 400 screaming people, and they'll go to bits. But like in terms of, like, for example, Brenda Giles has been in 34 panto. She hasn't missed a performance. She's been in every single one of them. Tony Corcoran, and it's probably the funniest man alive, as most people will agree, when he comes out in his dress. And around them you have like the likes of Toby Hickey, Adam O'Neill, Brian Toohey, Susan Bice, Fats Dunphy. He's known as Fats, we won't give him his proper name. And these people, they bounce off each other. If someone shouts at them, they'll stop the show and they'll shout back. They don't care, and that's what the crowd love.
9 senior dancers.
9 senior dancers, 2 teams of 8 kids. And we have 4 young kids this year playing the leads. Evan Sheen, Ali Coppinger, Cueva Scanlon, James Lyons Power. The 4 of them are the babes in the title, the babes in the wood, and Robin Hood saves the day, basically.
Robin Hood. Why Robin Hood? Why not?
It's, the Robin Hood panto and the Babes in the Wood were always 2 separate pantos. But they're probably...
no, they weren't.
Oh, yes, they were. But they're probably not the headlines, Cinderellas and Sleeping Beauties and things like that. So when you combine the 2 of them together, you get something that's at the level of, the rest of them.
And what about combining or getting Christmas songs into the whole thing then?
Yeah, Christmas songs. Well, we tend to play, there's a good Christmas vibe in there, but we tend to just play some Christmas songs before and during the interval and things like that, So from the time you come into the theatre, there's a real Christmas vibe going on the whole time.
Tell us about this little clip I'm going to play.
It's Brenda being nice to children.
Full control will not be mine until I banish that idiot girl Snow White from my side. Oh, how I hate the very sight of her. And isn't she ugly? Oh, yes, she is. Oh, yes, she is. Oh, yes, she is. Oh, shut up, you snotty-nosed little mingers. Oh, you make me sick.
Snotty-nosed little mingers, huh?
That's it. Tell us about the sensory aspect and what you've done.
Yeah, the sensory performance, I suppose, is probably something we've introduced in recent years, and it's something that's very important to all of us. It's probably the most important show we feel we do, and it's given families affected by sensory issues, autism, etc., a chance to come to the theatre, and we leave the lights on, we turn the sound down, we take out any loud big effects and things like that. Just make it a comfortable experience for them, And we're lucky enough that we can do it with a panto. You couldn't do it with every show.
Yeah, that's probably booked out as well, is it?
It's not, and there's actually some seats still available for that show if people want to get in touch with the box office. There's not a hell of a lot, but there's more than there is for other shows.
The demand has been phenomenal, and it's amazing how it's just so popular, and yet it's not amazing. It is, and credit is due. So we've a big announcement to make this morning.
We have indeed. So, we're overwhelmed with the support this year, and we know there's a lot of people on waiting lists and people who couldn't get tickets. So we're going to put on one extra performance this year. We're going to put on the 28th of December, which is a Saturday at 2:30pm. It's a matinee, which is always popular. And we're delighted to say the tickets are going on sale in 5 minutes, Damien? Is it
4 minutes time?
4 minutes, 12 noon. The tickets are going to be available. There's an extra 300 and odd tickets available at the Theatre Royal. So if people want to give a call to the box office, or if they want to go onto the website at 12 o'clock, not before 12 o'clock, and hopefully then we'll be able to let another 300-400 people in.
Go online by just theatreroyal, I think, .ie, is it?
theatreroyal.ie,
yeah.
And the phone number is 874402.
And for anybody working the Theatre Royal at present, we apologise already, because we're going to make your life very busy now over the next few minutes. And you can't ring until 12 o'clock, isn't that correct?
12 o'clock on the button, it will open, so please don't ring before then. You might miss your place in the queue. And hopefully we'll look forward to seeing you on the 28th.
I can see people getting into their cars now and driving down. The problem is, though, if you go down there and if there's a queue, you might lose out, potentially, because somebody may have bought the tickets online.
That's the
and
thing,
the tickets are being limited to 4 or 6.
When we go and release the booking, and you always see online, people saying, we couldn't get tickets, we this, we that, we the other. Like, you have to remember, if you're calling or queuing, there could be 10 people go online and book 6-7 tickets each and wipe them out before you even get there. So online, I think, is the way to go.
So, big announcement, one more gig on Saturday, the
28th of December, 2:30pm.
Big performance. Congratulations and well done, Wayne, and thanks very much for coming in, and I'm sure that'll be sold out in the next few minutes. Wayne, thanks so much.
Thank you.